A case could be made for Square Enix to lead off the triumphant return of mainline Final Fantasy to a Nintendo console with any of the non-MMO entries, but Final Fantasy IX in particular may have the strongest argument. It was the last entry in the immediate generation of titles that left Nintendo for Sony. It was the last to come in a series of multiple discs, the last without voice acting, and the final to feature 3D characters on 2D backgrounds. Maybe the most important distinction is that Final Fantasy IX was the final game in the series that would be written and structured by its creator, Hironobu Sakaguchi. This final single-digit title would go on to become Sakaguchi's love letter to the series, going back to its 1987 roots and incorporating different elements and themes from the games that came before it. Back in 2000, Final Fantasy IX was made to celebrate the past, while simultaneously leading the series into the next era. And now, almost 20 years later, it again leads the charge into the next era on Switch. Production for Final Fantasy IX began in the summer of 1998, near the end of the development of Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy had just gone through massive changes in the past few years, having made the leap to the brand new Sony PlayStation after having been a partner with Nintendo for all of the preceding games up until this point. The introduction of Final Fantasy VII was the first to jettison the medieval aesthetic for a more modern and realistic setting, a theme that would be continued on with Final Fantasy VIII. Sakaguchi was tapped to develop a new story that would return to its European roots, and he would create a world based on the English-Georgian period of the 18th and 19th centuries. By 1999, the future direction of the franchise was clear. Sakaguchi was working on the final curtain call for PlayStation 1, and the development of the first PlayStation 2 title, as well as the first MMORPG, had begun. While the team wanted to provide traditionalist fans with an experience that felt familiar, they also wanted to make sure that they were making something new. Art director Hideo Manaba summed up this feeling when he said, "We wanted to give the feeling of a series watershed, a sort of grand collection of what has come before." Manaba would confirm that the character Vivi, a clear callback to the Black Mage of the original Final Fantasy title, really exemplified this idea, confirming that because he was such a pivotal character, that part of the world design was centered around him. Final Fantasy IX released in 2000 to critical acclaim, with many praising the focus on character development. To this day, many still consider it to be one of their favorite of the franchise, and even former Squaresoft game designer Takeshi Arakawa has stated that if any Final Fantasy title deserved a sequel, it was 9. It would take another 15 years before Final Fantasy IX would receive attention when Square Enix would go on to release an upgraded version of the game to mobile platforms. Now, I'm on record as being vehemently opposed to mobile ports, but before I get too doom and gloom about it, I'll provide a surgical look at what's new in this remastered version. The most noticeable improvement comes thanks to an upgrade in the visuals through new character design. The polygonal, blocky design that was prevalent in the 90s has been updated with finer details, smoother and more natural curves, and colors that pop off the screen. Backgrounds and environments receive a boost in shading and color saturation, but often go overlooked when compared to the new character design. Another detail that I didn't notice until I saw the old and new versions side by side is that the remastered edition has a slight stretch so that it'll fill an iPad screen. Drilling down into the finer details, the battle menu and fonts are noticeably different, and a point of contention for many. The new style provides more clarity and is easier to read, but arguably some of the personality is lost with the switch to a more generic-looking typeface. Now this brings us to the complaint I hear the most, the dreaded music bug. Final Fantasy IX has an incredible soundtrack composed by the great Nobuo Uematsu, which I highly recommend you download to your phone for everyday listening. The issue is that when you enter a random battle, the track that was playing is reset back to the start, depriving the player of experiencing the full splendor of each beautifully composed song. This bug has been present for years, leaving me convinced that only two scenarios exist. Either this is not a bug at all and was a conscious decision by the team who built the remaster, or that Square Enix simply does not feel the resources needed to fix the issue are worth the cost. This HD remaster that was developed for mobile devices is the version that we see today released for Switch, and it's really sent me on a roller coaster of emotions. I'm happy to have the option of playing my favorite series on my favorite console, but I'm also frustrated that it's coming in a compromised package. When we consider that earlier versions of Final Fantasy titles got much better makeovers, it's confusing why Square Enix doesn't see value in addressing the drawbacks and devoting additional resources towards a more complete remake. I'm not saying we need the multi-year development of an episodic Final Fantasy VII do-over, but 9 deserves the same treatment that the first two Final Fantasies received with Final Fantasy Origins on PlayStation, or similar to what 4 got in the DS remake. All of these emotions aside, it's clear that what we see is all we're gonna get, so the only question left is whether you'd rather dust off the old PlayStation or put some money towards a visually improved version of a terrific game. My answer has to be to get whatever version you're willing to devote time to. Final Fantasy IX in any form is a wonderful experience, from the memorable cast of characters all the way down to its engaging story. I'm admittedly biased, having played the entire series over the course of my life, but in my opinion the best version of a Final Fantasy game is the one that you play and finish. Square Enix may have not given us the port that we deserve, but in any form, Final Fantasy IX deserves to be played.